Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rain Rude, and this is Rude Sports Talk, where you can get raw, uncut, uncensored analysis on today's and vintage sports, including pro wrestling. Speaking of pro wrestling, that's the topic of the day, and I want to talk about The Rock at WrestleMania. Um, the Rock is one of the greatest wrestlers to ever wrestle. You know, the what he did along with Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Undertaker, Kane, Mick Foley, Triple H, the list goes on. What he did for the industry of professional wrestling goes beyond words, beyond measure. Let's just get that straight. Now, I want to talk about his downfalls, his shortcomings. And I'm not picking on The Rock, but I just noticed something about the history of WrestleMania. You've had some of the all-time greats have phenomenal winning records at WrestleMania, iconic moments at WrestleMania. You know, with winning records, you have people like Steve Austin, you have people like, of course, The Undertaker, um, The Miz, even John Cena. These guys are known for winning at WrestleMania and having big moments at WrestleMania. Not so much The Miz with the fucking big moments. He had his moment in 2011, which that's for a whole nother podcast. But when you look at The Rock at WrestleMania, of course, his first WrestleMania being at WrestleMania 13, where he went against the Sultan, defended his Intercontinental Championship. In the next WrestleMania, he successfully defended his Intercontinental Championship against Ken Shamrock. Even though Ken Shamrock won the match, the decision was reversed because of Ken Shamrock's behavior after the match. Then, believe it or not, The Rock will go on to lose at 3 consecutive WrestleManias. And I know y'all probably thinking, well, damn, Rain, why? What is all this about? I noticed that The Rock is 0-4, 0-4 when it comes to world championship matches at WrestleMania. That's what this is about. It is pretty hard to fathom because you look at WrestleMania 15, of course, The Rock, he's the corporate champion, not the people's champion anymore, the corporate champion. He goes in, defends his championship against Stone Cold Steve Austin. Good old Stone Cold Steve Austin, who also revolutionized the sport of professional wrestling. He goes in, he has everything on his side. Stone Cold Steve Austin, the only thing he really had on his side going into that match was the fact that Mick Foley was supposed to be the special referee, which of course he didn't appear to the end of the match. Him and the Big Show had a match earlier in the night at WrestleMania 15 to determine who would be the ref for that match. But Big Show went ape shit. He chokeslammed Mick Foley through some chairs. He punched Vince McMahon. So that was one of his many, many face turns. Sometimes that gets lost. That gets lost in WrestleMania 15. That was the Big Show's first face turn. And The Rock, of course, he goes in as champion, walks out without the championship. Just was not able to hold on to that title. Now, then you get to WrestleMania 16. Now, to be fair with WrestleMania 16, this was a fatal four-way match. However, this was a fatal four-way elimination. So, to lose the match, you would have to either have to be pinned or tap out or submit. So that was the only way you could lose that match. And you look at that match, and we're back to WrestleMania 15 for a second, by the way. That was a terrific match with Steve Austin and The Rock. And it showed you that The Rock was ready for prime time. You know, he was ready to be a big star. And he walked into to his credit, he walked into WrestleMania 15 as the champion. But he, like I say, he was not able to walk out with the championship, but that was a terrific match. And probably the only thing really good on that show at WrestleMania 15. WrestleMania 15 is just one of those pay-per-views that people don't talk bad about it as a bad WrestleMania because of the era that it was in and the year that it was in, 1999. But if you want to see that everything was not great about the Attitude Era, go back and watch WrestleMania 15 and you will see what the hell I'm talking about. But The Rock, essentially was the replacement for Shawn Michaels. Some people don't realize that he was there to replace Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels was only supposed to be gone for a year in wrestling, but he couldn't put that pipe down, wherever the hell he pills, and he couldn't put the drugs down, so he was not able to come back. So The Rock was there to pretty much either carry the company or help carry the company for the next 2 years. But he was not able to hold on to that championship at WrestleMania 15, despite everything that he had on his side, including the corporation. So that would be one of his losses to Steve Austin at WrestleMania. Then you get to WrestleMania 2000, which was WrestleMania 16. Like I said, it was a fatal four-way match. It had The Rock. Triple H was the defending world champion, WWF champion. You had the Big Show, and then for some fucking reason, Mick Foley was included in that match. Now, I like Mick Foley. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I respect what he's done for this industry as well. But the match was originally, it should have been The Rock and Triple H. But when you look at the fact that Stone Cold was supposed to interfere in whatever match they had one-on-one pay-per-view where Triple H drops The Rock the championship, it makes more sense because Stone Cold was not healthy enough to participate. But however, The Rock was still not able to walk out with the championship once again at WrestleMania. He did make it to the final two, him and Triple H. He did overcome a lot of odds in that match. This is where there was a fucking McMahon in every corner. Linda McMahon in Mick Foley's corner, Shane McMahon in Big Show's corner, Vince McMahon in The Rock's corner, and Stephanie McMahon in Triple H's corner. And it's pretty cool when you think about it because this is the second WrestleMania in a row that Vince McMahon has been on The Rock's side coming into the match. But I don't know why in the hell you would trust Vince McMahon. The Rock kind of, no offense to Sting when I say this, but he kind of looked like the Sting of the WWF at that time. You remember when Sting, you all remember that time that Sting joined the Four Horsemen and thought they weren't going to whoop his ass. This was The Rock kind of having that syndrome. At this point, the corporation had pretty much descended, where the corporation was no more, actually. Everybody went their own separate ways that was in the corporation, now that I think about it. But The Rock could have used them here, but Vince McMahon turns on The Rock, and Triple H walks out with the championship, which was the first time that a heel walked out of WrestleMania as champion. We just saw that with Roman Reigns 2 weeks ago. He walked out with the world title, which that doesn't happen too often. Those may be the only 2 times that it has happened, where the show ends with the heel leaving as champion. But The Rock, once again, was not able to get the damn job done. The great one. Then we go to WrestleMania 17. Now, this was one of the biggest matches in professional wrestling history. The Rock and Steve Austin. Steve Austin wins his third Royal Rumble in 2001. The Rock wins the WWF Championship at No Way Out from Kurt Angle in one hell of a match. And by the way, the Fatal 4-Way was pretty good too. It was 30 minutes, which a little long, but it was elimination. I can deal with it. It didn't really, it wasn't one of the best WrestleMania main events, but it also wasn't the worst. First time it had been more than 2 people in the main event at WrestleMania. So for what it was pretty good. I know a lot of people kind of look at that match as disappointing for whatever reason. The only thing that didn't really make sense about that match was the fact that Mick Foley was included. That's what I didn't get. Especially if he was going to retire for real. Like it looked like he was at the time because he wouldn't go on to wrestle another match for 3 years, almost 4 years. Now that I think about it, well, no, it would be 4 years. So, but the match itself, regardless of the circumstances, was decent. Now, like I said, you get to WrestleMania 17 in Houston. Steve Austin coming back from the big neck injury that kept him out for a year. The Rock had successfully carried the WWF during Steve Austin's absence. He had help with Triple H. He would get help from The Undertaker more later on during Steve Austin's hiatus. Same thing with Kane. Kane would return. So The Rock did a lot of heavy lifting in 2000. I gotta give him credit for that. He did a lot of heavy lifting. But the heavy lifter and the guy that lifted him is coming back at WrestleMania 17. And he's coming for that championship. And that would be my personal favorite wrestler of all of the times, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, going into this match, I was nervous, I must admit. Now, I can admit this 20 years later. I was nervous because The Rock, he was on fire. Steve Austin had come back and he was building back up his theme that he had when he left. Actually came back, in my opinion, a better technical wrestler than he was before he left. He never really fully returned to the form he had before SummerSlam of 97 when Owen Hart injured him. But he was better than he had been after that injury until the Survivor Series 99 when he went out with his injury. So you got Steve Austin. He wants his belt back. The night that he got injured in the first place, he was supposed to be competing for the WWF Championship, him, The Rock, and Triple H at the Survivor Series 1999, which the WWF really missed the boat on that. And I'm still pissed off about that for the simple fact that I paid my $30. I'm 13 years old, save up my $30 to see The Rock, Triple H, and Steve Austin, which could have been at the main event of WrestleMania, by the way. And one of these WrestleManias, they were three biggest stars of the Attitude Era, just for Steve Austin on the same night to get run down like a dog in the street, as he would say. Now, I have no problem with Steve Austin not competing in that match. I have a big problem the way they did it the night of at the Survivor Series 1999. And it also kind of made the Big Show's championship win look weak. Or not weak, but I don't want to use the word weak. He was due for a title. It tainted it because everybody wanted to see Steve Austin or The Rock win that match instead of the Big Show. But WrestleMania 17, prime time, in my opinion, the greatest WrestleMania ever. You had The Rock and Steve Austin. The Rock goes in as champion again. So the second time in 3 years, 3 WrestleManias, he's went in as WWF champion. Second time in 3 years, he's defending it against Steve Austin. Steve Austin wins again. The Rock is once again not able to get the job done at WrestleMania. And also for the third year in a row, Vince McMahon is involved with the finish somehow, some way. And for the second year in a row, he turns on The Rock, which him and The Rock were not allies anyway at this point. But who in the living blue hell would have thought that Steve Austin and Vince McMahon would align in the main event of WrestleMania, 2 years removed from Vince McMahon doing everything in his power to keep Steve Austin from winning the title? People can say what they want to about the heel turn of Steve Austin in 2001, or the heel run, I should say. That's a very polarizing issue. Looking back, I thought it was good. I think the reason why it gets looked down on so much, and this is all just my opinion, is because of how poorly the invasion angle was presented to us. I think that's the main reason why Steve Austin's heel run gets looked down upon to this day, or maybe even at the time. But looking back, It was funny as shit, and Steve Austin whooping everybody's ass after he turned heel. However, for the moment, in WrestleMania, once again, The Rock is not able to get the job done. Now, I know a lot of Rock fans are going to be pissed off at me, probably for this video in general. Oh, man, The Rock would have won if Vince McMahon hadn't brung his ass down there. Who the fuck knows? Well, we got what we got, damn it. For the second year, the second WrestleMania in 3 of them, Steve Austin walks out as the champion, and he defeats The Rock in the main event of WrestleMania. The Rock couldn't get the job done. But of course, The Rock would continue to go on and have a few more matches at WrestleMania. They wouldn't be for the title. He's 0-3 at this point. I don't know. Maybe that was the reason he didn't get another championship match at WrestleMania as a challenger or as a champion. Maybe it's because he couldn't get the job done. Who knows? But you get to WrestleMania 18, and I will say this. His victory over Hulk Hogan is almost, if not as good, as any championship win that he's had. This is the immortal Hulk Hogan. Yes, Hulk Hogan was aligned with the NWO, but that crowd in WrestleMania 18 will tell you I don't give a shit what anybody has to say about Hulk Hogan. That crowd in WrestleMania 18, and keep in mind, this is a man that was in 2002. So 8 years prior, he went to the competition and tried to put the WWF out of business. The people in Toronto, Canada did not give a shit. I can tell you, me being in Memphis, Tennessee, watching that on pay-per-view, I did not give a shit. But at that time, I was kind of done with The Rock. Me personally, I still respected his work, but he had got all Hollywood on me. And you know, I feel like that should have been Steve Austin and Hogan at WrestleMania. Especially you got Steve Austin going, and keep in mind, going into WrestleMania 18, Steve Austin had competed in five WrestleManias and had only lost one. And that was against the Hitman, Bret Hart. So going into this WrestleMania, he had only lost one match at WrestleMania out of 5. One. Also, he had won the title at his previous 3 WrestleManias, which were 14, 15, and 17. Keep that in mind. That should have been him going against Hulk Hogan. But we got what we got, and what we got was phenomenal. You know, I gained a lot of the respect that I had lost for The Rock. And other fans, I mean, you can go back and watch that WrestleMania 18 for yourself. Other fans were losing. It wasn't just me. Other fans were losing respect for The Rock too. That was part of the reason for some of those boos. The commentators were trying to make it seem, and I know that's Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler's job, they were trying to make it seem as if it was just because it was Hulk Hogan. That ain't the fucking reason. And they did one hell of a job. If you want to go see Jerry Lawler's best performance on commentary, he's been good. He's been spectacular. Him and Jim Ross were spectacular throughout their entire run on the commentary team. But in my opinion, Jerry Lawler was never better than WrestleMania 18, The Rock and Hogan. He was never better than that day in that match. That's just one of those matches in the history of wrestling where I could sit up here all day long and say that should have been Steve Austin, but shit, I'd be a lying ass if I say I didn't enjoy that match. That's just one of those matches. The crowd made the match better. The wrestlers made the match better. You got 2 of the all-time greats in The Rock and Hulk Hogan. You got the greatest commentary team ever in Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler. They made the match better. So everybody did. That was just a fantastic. I don't get to say that too much these days with the WWE. But that was just a fantastic job. My only real gripe, and this can go either way, is that maybe that match should have been last. But Triple H was making a big comeback, similar to what Steve Austin was doing the year before. But of course, Triple H is not Steve Austin, so it didn't get as big. Into Triple H's defense, he also, no offense to Chris Jericho when I say this, but he also was not facing an opponent on Steve Austin or The Rock's level either. So that has to be taken into account. But that match was fantastic. The Rock wins. Hogan turns face. The crowd turned him face during the match. He officially turns face the next night on Raw. But you can see that coming from the aftermath, the NWO jumping him, and The Rock coming to Hogan's defense. Then you get to WrestleMania 19. WrestleMania 19, you get The Rock and Steve Austin one more time. I'm thinking that then The Rock had the nerve to come back. Hollywood had the nerve to shave his head. He wanted to be Steve Austin so bad that he had to shave his head. But I guess maybe the pressure was off of The Rock for this one because he was able to beat Steve Austin 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring without cheating. Okay, I'm going to step off my Steve Austin bandwagon for a minute and talk about just how good that match was. You can make the argument. Now, like I say, Stone Cold and The Rock in WrestleMania 17, them two got no better than that. It don't get no better than that WrestleMania 17 match. However, if you want to say that this match at WrestleMania 19 with Steve Austin and The Rock was better than their first WrestleMania championship match, you have a case, in my opinion. This was a very good match. It was interesting for the fact that it wasn't for the championship. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the only pay-per-view match that they had that was not for any title. One-on-one, that is. That was the first pay-per-view match that they had that wasn't for any championship. Because they had a match at the December 1997 In Your House pay-per-view, D-Generation X. That was for the Intercontinental title, which, of course, The Rock was never able to beat Steve Austin on pay-per-view for a title. So we know how that ended. Steve Austin walked out, beat the hell out of Nation of Dominate. The Rock had a lot of help. But he had no help at WrestleMania 19 when he defeated Steve Austin in the middle of the ring after 3 rock bottoms. As a Steve Austin fan, that hurt my feelings like a motherfucker. I was 17 years old at the time, and when I saw The Rock about to execute that 3rd rock bottom, I knew the match was about to end, and I just had to brace myself. But what I did not know, of course, was that was going to be Steve Austin's last wrestling match. That I did not know. I was bitter at The Rock and the WWE for a long time for that. But in hindsight, as a 35-year-old man, I can appreciate that match a little bit more because I guess I don't think I would have chose anybody else to beat Steve Austin in his last match over The Rock, with maybe the exception of The Undertaker. But it would make more sense still with The Rock. You know, because at that time, The Undertaker was still good in the ring, but The Rock was just better than him. You know, I have The Rock a little bit higher on my all-time list as The Undertaker. Even though you could go either way, but The Rock was just better in the ring at that time. So I would have chose him too. Then you get to WrestleMania 20, which I guess The Rock, once again, I'm going to give him an excuse for not getting the job done this one. Number one, it wasn't for any championship. It was a handicap match as well, the Rock and Sock Connection against Evolution, which consists of Randy Orton, another one of my favorites, Batista, and one of the all-time greats, Ric Flair. Not a bad match. Evolution, the numbers game, catch up to the Rock and Sock Connection. Evolution wins. It advances the storyline with Randy Orton and Mick Foley. I would have loved to see a match maybe at SummerSlam with The Rock and Batista. That would have been nice, but we didn't get that. That's okay. We got what we got. And that will be The Rock's last WrestleMania match for 8 years. He makes his electrifying return to wrestling. His first match back after 7 years is at the Survivor Series in Madison Square Garden 2011. Him and John Cena, the super team, going against the colossal team of The Miz and R-Truth. I will never understand this shit. I'm just glad they didn't put that in WrestleMania. But going into WrestleMania, you got The Rock and John Cena. Had a whole year build up, which I never want to fucking see again. But it had a whole year build up. The Rock and John Cena, to me, exceed expectations match wise on one hell of a WrestleMania show. To end it, The Rock wins, but it's not for the title. Of course not. The Rock won. Of course it's not for the championship if The Rock wins. But then you get to 2013. Which I have, at the time, I didn't have a problem with this, but looking back, it was a mistake. Where The Rock defeats CM Punk at the Royal Rumble in 2013, which was a decent match. Don't get me wrong. Definitely a championship caliber match. Nice to see The Rock and CM Punk get to mix it up. You know, I think that's a match that in time has been appreciated a little bit more because these are two guys from two different eras. So it was nice to see The Rock compete against somebody else, somebody other than John Cena in his comeback. That was nice. But however, you get to WrestleMania, which is The Rock's, well, no, it's not his last WrestleMania match, but it's his last WrestleMania championship match. Once again, for the third time in WrestleMania history, he walks in as the WWE champion. He leaves without it again. But this time, it's John Cena who does the honors. As someone who is not really a big fan of neither one of those two guys, I respect both of their work. Just not the biggest fan. I appreciate both of them, John Cena and The Rock, that is, for what they've done for this industry. But I was glad to see John Cena win for the simple fact, at least I knew that the belt was going to be defended on a regular basis now. You know, that's the only fucking reason. Because the match didn't suck. That WrestleMania was bad. Wasn't the worst WrestleMania, but that was definitely the worst WrestleMania that no, I can't say that. I would say that was the worst one since 24, but no. I mean, the worst one since 25, my fault, but maybe not. But either way, because 25 and 27 weren't that good either. I'd take WrestleMania 29 over 27. That's among one of the worst. But 29 was not the best WrestleMania, but I guess it had its bright spots. This match not really being one of them. But that's because of the standards where The Rock did tear his pec during the match. So that could be a reason, you know, that could be a legitimate reason why that match wasn't as good. Also, is called twice in a lifetime for a reason. And the reason is that everybody was thinking that the match at WrestleMania 28 was going to be the only fucking time they had this match. But in the grand scheme of things, this should have been bigger because it's a championship match between The Rock and John Cena. And it just came at the wrong time because that should have been CM Punk in that main event. I don't give a damn if you have a triple threat match. You know, some people might even say Daniel Bryan, but I don't think it was Daniel Bryan's time yet. They could have did better than putting him in a tag team match with Kane against Big E and Dolph Ziggler. You know, they could have did much better than that. But because the New Day was not formed yet, that wouldn't come to a year later. But it wasn't Daniel Bryan's time yet, but it definitely was CM Punk's time. But they put him in the bullshit. I'm not gonna call it bullshit. They put him in the match with the Undertaker. That could have been the championship match. It would have been 500 days for CM Punk being champion against the Undertaker's undefeated streak at WrestleMania. So you don't know who's gonna win that match. But no, that was by far the best match of the night, the Undertaker and CM Punk. But and it had its glow to it, the build up to it was questionable. It raised some eyebrows. It's just the fact that they used Paul Bearer. He had died during that time period. They just used him too much in that time period. But nonetheless, The Rock still doesn't get the job done for the title again. So that puts him at 0-4 in championship matches at WrestleMania. But that's what I want to hear from you all. My question is, does those 4 championship match losses at WrestleMania put a damper on The Rock's status at WrestleMania? Because when I think of the all-time greats, when it comes to the WrestleMania event, he gets brought up as maybe he should be. But in my opinion, that's mainly because of the feud with Steve Austin and the 2 big-time wins he had at WrestleMania. I will give him that much. He does have the distinction of being one of the few wrestlers to defeat Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. Because the only other guys on that list that defeated Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania by pinfall or submission, that is, the Ultimate Warrior and The Rock. That's it. The Ultimate Warrior and The Rock. Yeah, they are the only 2 wrestlers to defeat Hulk Hogan by pinfall or submission at WrestleMania. He lost at WrestleMania 9, but that was a bunch of bullshit. That was a disqualification win by Ted DiBiase and IRS. But The Rock is only one of the 2 wrestlers to defeat Hulk Hogan by pinfall submission at WrestleMania. So that's something to think about. But he also has those 4 matches that he lost, those 4 championship matches that he lost at the WrestleMania event. Because you look at guys like Steve Austin, you look at guys like Hulk Hogan, you look at guys like, at least Shawn Michaels has the distinction of longevity, even though his win-loss record at WrestleMania, I believe, is like 8-9. But he has a distinction of longevity and also having the best match at most of the WrestleMania he was at. Including those 2 with The Undertaker, including the Revolution and ladder match. So, in Triple H, that's why I didn't put his name in there, because he has longevity as well, but unlike Shawn Michaels and unlike The Rock, he's had bad WrestleMania matches with top guys. So that's why I kind of would put The Rock and Shawn Michaels above him. Of course, you got The Undertaker, who's only lost 2 matches at WrestleMania. One of those matches he should not have lost. I still have a problem with him losing to Roman Reigns. It took me a year for me to get over him losing to Brock Lesnar. But I can understand it. At least Brock Lesnar can probably beat The Undertaker up in real life. Now, with Roman Reigns, I don't get it. So, with The Rock, just keep in mind those 4 championship losses that he had at WrestleMania. Does that take him down the list a little bit? Or does his victories, which were monumental, 2 of them, well, actually 3 of them, because if I'm not mistaken, he's the only wrestler to beat John Cena, Hulk Hogan, and Steve Austin at WrestleMania. And he may be in the... No, he's not the only person to beat all 3 of them, period. Kurt Angle has too. Yeah, Kurt Angle has also done it, and I'm sure a couple other wrestlers. Sure, Triple H has. Yeah, Triple H has beat all three of them, I believe. So he does have the distinction of being the only wrestler to beat Steve Austin, John Cena, and Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania. And those were big victories, especially Steve Austin and Hulk Hogan. And I'm not trying to downplay his victory over John Cena, but well, actually, that may be just as impressive because John Cena is not accustomed to losing at WrestleMania. He's another guy who I consider kind of a hero of WrestleMania, a cornerstone of WrestleMania, John Cena. So that's pretty impressive. Beat The Rock. I mean, he beat Austin, Hogan, Cena at WrestleMania. Does that mean more than his 4 championship match losses? Please subscribe, please comment, please hit that like button. I want to know you all's opinion. Which one is more important? His wins at WrestleMania, The Rock's, his wins at WrestleMania, or his losses at WrestleMania? Because both of them are monumental. My name is Ryan Rude. You can follow me on Twitter. It'll be in the description at Ryan Rude. That's my Twitter tag. I also have Rude Sports Talk available on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. So feel free to listen to those as well. I talk about a lot of NBA on those as well. I'll be putting different content on YouTube than I do on my Rude Sports Talk podcast. So, like I said, and I also have a Facebook page